right, welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, a pragmatic conversation about all things transportation. I am Wes Marshall, professor of civil engineering at University of Colorado Denver and author of the book Killed by a Traffic Engineer. And with me from overseas tonight is
David Zipper. I am a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative, a contributing writer on transportation topics at both Fox and Bloomberg City Lab, and I am coming to you at the moment from southern France, where I am for a week. So, bonsoir to listeners.
yeah. So for that reason, we're not doing this live on YouTube, making sure that the technology glitches are kind of internal. So, so to start with, I think I'm just curious. Like, how are things over there in Europe? How's it going?
Well, it's very nice, let me say, particularly for someone like myself who lives in Washington, D.C., which is going through it right now. It's nice to step away for a little while, I have to say, although I'll be back in a few days. But I was in northern Italy, in Bologna and Pavia for about a week. I'm writing a story that'll come out soon about some interesting stuff in Bologna. But what's actually interesting now, I'm here for the week in southern France for doing some work and some personal stuff. But I don't know if you know this, Wes. Did you say you've never been to France? Is that right?
I have not. Yeah, that's true.
Well, you're missing out on a lot of goat cheese. My God, I went to a cheese store today, and there were, I think, 75 kinds of goat cheese, and it was extremely overwhelming because they all look the same to me. But what's actually interesting about France politically is that where I am, which is sort of like the Riviera side, is where there's a lot of old money. It's very conservative. So
Hmm.
the cities like Nice and Antibes and Cannes, which are near where I am right now, they're actually all led by sort of like right of center leaders. Like they're not liberal at all. This part of these cities and this region of France, and yet sort of fascinatingly, they've been going through like super pedestrianization efforts in the last 20 years. All of those cities with kicking cars out of downtown streets over the last 20 to 30 years, creating bike lanes. I was just in Nice a few days ago, like walking along this oceanside, or I guess seaside. It's the Mediterranean promenade. It was wonderful, and I just find it very interesting that it doesn't feel like pedestrianization is sort of politicized here
Yeah,
in the same way that it is in the U.S.
that's an interesting point because I've always felt that it shouldn't be. Like, for some reason in this country, we make it into a big right left issue, but wanting to be safe on the streets, like wanting your kids to be able to bike to school or walk to the store, or if you want to walk to a restaurant, whatever it is, like it shouldn't be something that is politicized, but it has become that.
No, it has, and I think the most famous urbanist leader in maybe the world, but certainly in France, is Anne Hidalgo in Paris, right? Who's
Yeah.
socialist, very liberal. But what's interesting is here there's a lot of similar stuff happening, not to the level of Paris, but certainly in the same direction, and it's led by people on the right. So I'm very curious. I've been talking to some folks who are urban planners in the south of France to understand why, and what I'm told is that a lot of it here actually has to do with tourism. Like you're competing for tourists, you competing for conventions, and you just sort of have to have a walkable, pleasant center city, or you can't do that. So it's sort of economics. But I'm still curious. I'm learning and I'm curious. And frankly, I might end up writing something about it. So if there's listeners out there who know more than me about Southern French politics and urbanism, which by the way is a very low bar, please get in touch, davidzipper.com, because I'm kind of fascinated and I'm having a great time and really enjoying the cities for all the reasons that I think I would in a place like Amsterdam or Paris that's famously liberal. So that's sort of what my adventure
Yeah.
here has been.
Like, my other guess would be that it's much more the norm there. So I mean, a lot of people that are from France or Europe like grew up in a place where that was the norm, and that's not as much the case here. So
Also true. There's
yeah,
also, I think, more wealthy people or traditionally conservative people who live in central cities. I think in places
in Europe, yeah.
like France. Yeah. So I think that creates more of like a political motivation. Like they want walkable streets for themselves, as opposed to the rich people who largely live in suburbs in the U.S. They're like, well, where do I park my car for free? But these are all loosely held hypotheses, and I'm sure there are people listening to the podcast who will know more than me about it. And I'm not kidding when I say, please let me know what you think, because I'm really curious now.
No, it's a good question to bring up. But let's move on to word on the street. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. This is our news segment of the week, and the topic that we're going to discuss today is something that's been in the news a lot. It was in the New York Times just a few days ago, and it is a effort underway by the Department of Transportation Secretary of the U.S., Sean Duffy, famous for his role in reality TV, as well as being a Secretary of Transportation, of course, to address the biggest street safety issue of our time, which is colored crosswalks. Some of you may have seen that he has issued a guidance, or really more of a demand, to cities around the country, saying that in the name of safety, we need to, or cities must remove any sort of coloring or artistry with crosswalks. Crosswalks are simply white paint to show where pedestrians can cross. Get rid of anything else. And what he's really targeting here, it seems, are rainbow crosswalks that are LGBT themed. And there's been some stories about, in particular, the crosswalk out in Orlando, Florida, outside the Pulse nightclub, where there was a horrible shooting at a gay nightclub. People were killed, and actually, like the state of the city removed it. I actually think it was the state of Florida that removed it over the city's objections. And then local activists repainted it. It's now have gone on and on like 3 times. But a lot of cities are removing these rainbow colored crosswalks because I've read this repeatedly, they're afraid of losing federal funding for other transportation issues. So, Wes, let's give it over to you. Just how worried should we be about the danger of colored crosswalks?
Well, the key word you said on that was safety. Like they say they're doing it for safety. They say that they're seeking uniformity, that we need our crosswalks to be standard and not have the non-standard markings. But when you think about these sort of crosswalks, the non-uniformity is exactly the point. Like, and that's why,
Yeah.
like, I will say there's not a lot of peer-reviewed research on it, but the studies that are out there, like the Bloomberg Sam Schwartz study that I think you've seen as well, is showing that they are safer. Like they are getting fewer crashes. They are getting more drivers yielding for pedestrians, and sort of the signs that we want. So to say it's being done for safety, it's hard to make that case because there are definitely no studies saying that they're less safe. I've not seen anything on that front. And if somebody has done one, I'd love to see it.
Well, you are more generous than I am, Wes. I think it's a load of BS. This is just simply, um, it's an anti-gay measure, and it's disgusting for that reason, I would
Yeah.
say. And I do want to underscore what you just referenced, Wes, because that Bloomberg Sam Schwartz study is the though it's not academic per se, it's the closest thing I've seen, where they looked, I think, at 4 colored crosswalks and looked at safety results efforts. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, but the results that they saw were a 50% decrease in the rate of crashes, 37% decrease in crashes leading to injuries, and 17% 50% decrease in pedestrian crashes, 37% decrease in crashes leading to injuries, and a 17% decrease in total crash rate, including just car on car crashes. So there's really no evidence that this has anything to do with safety. To me, this is just politics wrapped up in language that a Vision Zero or street safety, which is frankly just pisses me off. I don't know if I
Yeah.
can
And
say
that
that on
one
the
had a,
podcast, but I will.
I think that one had a 27% increase in drivers yielding to pedestrians too. And there was
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
one I saw from Richmond, in the Jackson Ward neighborhood. They have kind of a
Mm.
black culture rainbow crosswalk, which is a kind of a cool picture that I've seen. But they found, I think, a 50 something percent like reduction in what they would consider near misses, which, I admit near misses aren't a perfect proxy for safety, but they're also finding better safety in that one.
Well, I just want to push this one a little bit further because it really does anger me. One point that was made by a thoughtful person on Blue Sky said, I wonder if this town in Massachusetts that has Thin Blue Line crosswalk is now going to remove that because of the distraction, supposedly. Or are we just talking about rainbows here? Good question. I think we know the
Yeah.
answer. We don't have to answer that, but it's a
Well,
valid point. Go ahead. Yeah.
there is a town next to the one I grew up in, so new to Massachusetts. There, I think they recolored the yellow lines in the middle to be the Italian flag colors, and the city has kept painting them yellow again, and they keep going back and forth. So I'm not sure. That I don't think is coming down from the federal government. I'm not sure. I saw that story a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was kind of funny how they're going back and forth with that paint. But a lot of this stuff, safety is not what we're talking about. So people can bring up the
No.
safety points, but that is not the argument on sort of the side to take the stuff away.
No, and I think it's important to take a step back and realize we're talking about an order from Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, who, in his however many months it's been on the job, has said that he's questioning bike lanes. He has talked about the supposed danger of transit, which is actually the safest mode to get around cities. He's not a credible voice, I would argue, on street safety. And to prioritize this issue of among all is, I think, indicative of someone who is pursuing an agenda that is based on politics rather than on saving lives.
So I know for a fact that Pete Buttigieg actually had a copy of my book. I don't know if he read it or not.
Copy of
Want to
your
get,
book?
yeah, I want to get one in the hands of Sean Duffy too. I mean, I do not watch pretty much any reality TV, but back when I did, was the Real World Boston was right up my alley. So I did
Oh,
watch his season 20 whatever years ago. That was probably some of the
yeah.
last reality TV that I've seen.
Was he one of your favorites at the time?
Oh, yeah, let's not go there like that. he there's enough embarrassing things he did. Even at that time, they were embarrassing, and hopefully some of the stuff he's overcome, but I don't think all of it.
No. I mean, let's just be honest about Duffy. He's not a transportation guy. There was a pretty thoughtful article from an outlet in Wisconsin. I would call it out if I could remember back when Duffy was nominated, because he's a former congressman from Republican, obviously from Wisconsin. And this journalist basically said, look, I followed this guy for years. He's never said anything about transportation one way or the other, except to basically say we should all be spending more money on highways. So
What
this
he's
is not
got
an
like
area
a
of particular passion, I would say.
oh, he's got like a dozen kids, so I mean, he's probably got the biggest car you've ever seen to get them around. So
Yeah.
I think that's his perspective on transportation. But I mean, obviously he has kids too, so maybe there are things you could talk to him about. But I mean, that's kind of a bigger picture issue that we put people in charge of transportation that don't sort of know a ton about transportation. Like we do the same thing here with our transit agency. We have elected officials that never take the train or the bus in charge of that. So I don't know, it doesn't make a lot of sense like who we decide should be leading that. I know it's a
Yeah.
political appointment, but at the same time, there are plenty of politicians that are steeped in the transportation world that you would feel would have more to bring to the table.
No, I think it's a great point. You look back over the transportation secretaries of the last 25 years. I mean, a lot of the time it's people who were seen as sort of potential future party leaders, like Anthony Fox, who ended up parlaying that role to become a lobbyist for Lyft, or it's people who are just sort of like important people within the party that you want to give a reward to. And we kind of got lucky, I think, for a little bit there with Buttigieg, who what is like someone who you want to support the next generation of leaders. He's an important person in the Biden's circle, but he also genuinely has always cared about transportation. When he was mayor of South Bend, he was very excited, I remember, to win an award for South Bend as a biking city. I think he did what he could, and more or less, I would say, as secretary of USDOT. But he was, I think, I don't know. We're in a very different world right now. Let's put it that way.
And whenever I heard him speak about transportation, he just seemed very thoughtful about it. And
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
hope Sean Duffy can start becoming more thoughtful, like the more he learns about it. But right now, it's just very reactive. Like he is just saying what's on the agenda as opposed to what is the right way to actually approach these questions and issues.
Yeah, and it's very political, right? He's very political. I like everything about the Trump administration, to be honest. I would say. Um,
All right, well, that was depressing. Can we go on to?
Yeah, let's go on to a nice happy topic. That's sarcasm because I know what's coming next. Go ahead,
uh,
Wes.
are we doing mine next? All right. So I wanted to talk about paratransit this week. So
This
this
is
is our
roundabout.
roundabout.
First of all,
This is
roundabout.
roundabout. So we each get to pick a topic, and I'll go first. So my roundabout topic is paratransit. If you happen to not know what paratransit is, it's essentially the shared door-to-door transportation service for people with disabilities who can't use the regular bus train routes. So any public transit agency that runs fixed bus, fixed rail must also provide this. It's a complimentary service. Paratransit is for people with disabilities. It's not optional. It's a civil rights requirement. So it's not just a service choice that these agencies are putting out there. And from my standpoint, nobody really talks a lot about paratransit. Like when I talk to people about it, and especially people that don't use paratransit, they mainly just complain about how much it costs. And these transit agencies have to provide, they perceive it as this amazing red carpet door to door service. And they complain about, on average, I think agencies are paying, upwards of $30 per trip, subsidizing it. And it's probably double that in, cities like Boston or New York.
Yeah,
But they
I think
can't
it
charge
is.
that much. I think they're only legally allowed to charge twice whatever the regular fare is. So, if the fare is $2, they can charge $4, but it costs the agency like $30 or up. So a lot of people are complaining about it from that standpoint of being a big subsidization. On the other side, when I talk to people that actually use paratransit, they just complain how much it sucks. So that's something that we were interested in terms of research.
Hmm.
We did a study where RTD was able to share their, there's anonymous paratransit trip data. So we looked at, something like 1.2 million paratransit trips, and we were
In Denver,
comparing
right? Just to be
in
clear,
the
RTD
Denver
meaning
region.
Denver. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And in trying to figure out how to study this, like one of the fun things we found was Federal Highway, so FHWA, had a thing called the Misery Index. And the Misery Index, I guess mathematically, it compares sort of the worst 20% of the trips to like the average trip. So you're basically quantifying the unpredictability of whatever you're studying, in this case, the paratransit. So paratransit trips are pretty volatile. You have to make the reservation like 24 hours in advance, and you get this 1 hour window. So essentially, what we found is that it's not the red carpet door to door service that we imagine. Like for you and I, if we need to take a trip at lunchtime to like go to the doctor, I mean, it
Hmm.
might be like half an hour to an hour. For someone using paratransit, they have to dedicate like 3 to 4 hours of their day in order
Yeah.
to have a 95% chance of making it to the same doctor's appointment that you or I do. So it's just, I mean, it's the worst. And it costs so much, it doesn't solve the problems. I don't know. So it's just this big disconnect in terms of how it's perceived versus what it actually is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think paratransit is one of the sort of like open, dirty secrets of public transportation where it's funny, no one would ever say anything like say this to me on the record as it were, but I've heard so many people in transit agencies or who work closely with transit agencies say something along the lines of, the goal with paratransit is to have it be just like barely good enough that you aren't having everyone who uses it be up in arms. Because if you actually make it a good experience, which you could do with, like using on demand services and whatnot, you're not only going to lead people to take more trips, you're going to induce people who are sort of like they have some mobility limits, but they're not necessarily disabled, blah, 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 blah. They will try to qualify as paratransit users instead of taking the bus, which is massively cheaper per trip for a transit agency. So although agencies will never acknowledge this, they kind of sort of, I hate to put it this way, but they kind of like seek to make it be a bad but tolerable experience, which is so
Well,
depressing. But I don't know what else they can do given how we fund transit in this country.
And it's not easy to qualify. Like when we interviewed people in Denver, I think they have to go to some warehouse somewhere and prove that they have a hard time like getting up a ramp.
That's right.
And yeah, it is. I mean, they were basically saying it's an embarrassing, humiliating experience to get to that point. But like the
But you
people that are
understand why
using
it's
it,
done, right? From the transit
yeah,
perspective, you get it, right? Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, they are. But they're trying to make, like you said, barely tolerable. I mean, they're trying to, at a minimum, just meet the federal requirements, right? And
Yeah.
that's, I know we talked about things like SEPTA in recent weeks, and when you cut back on a line or the hours, it also cuts back on paratransit. So, one of my former students, Tom Grushka, who's visually impaired, was really interested in this issue, and he created this amazing GIS map where you could, this is back around the time when COVID was reducing lines. So with the map, you could say if we would take away this line, how the paratransit map reduces is with that. So you could, as someone that uses paratransit, pick a place to live in because you have access to paratransit from that location. And then if the transit agency takes the line away, like if SEPTA does that for some reason, you could all of a sudden be ineligible. You're outside of that 3/4 mile buffer is what the federal requirements have. So it's so up in the air for the people that rely on it. And because it sucks so bad, they really rely on it. If you're using paratransit,
Yeah.
you're using it because you have to. And that, even though it's a terrible choice, is your best choice.
No, that's actually that's a great point. Like I genuinely don't know what someone who relies on paratransit in Philadelphia is doing right now because we're as we're recording this on day 2 of this
Yeah.
really just terrible cutoff in transit service, and I think it's the 6th largest transit system in the U.S. It's tragic. Geez, we're just going from one depressing topic to another, Wes. We really need to figure something better. But
Yeah,
because
maybe in our next episode of 9/11, it'll be less
yeah,
depressing.
yeah, right. Should I my
Yes.
roundabout
Yeah,
topic
go ahead.
isn't a whole lot more uplifting, but I'm happy to share. Um, what what I want to talk about is the sort of safety trends in the U.S. and Canada. We talked about Wes's trip to Alberta on a previous episode, and of course, Wes and I really sort of gave birth to this podcast when we were together in Toronto this spring. So we both have some familiarity with Canada, and I'll just say personally, I've always found it really interesting to compare road safety in the US and Canada because it's so easy for people in the US to say, oh, well, Europe is much safer because it's so different. America is just a car centric, spacious country. I'm like, well, yeah, so is Canada. And an American is literally 2.5 times more likely to die in a crash than a Canadian. And so I wrote a story earlier this month. I think it was last week. I'm losing track of time. A week and a half ago, let's say to be safe, that basically sort of used as a launch point, though expanded from it, a recent research paper that was put out by IIHS, Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, and TURF, which is a Canadian road safety organization, an acronym that I can't remember. So I'm just going to call it TURF. But they basically looked at the trend lines in road safety in Canada and the US. And I found this really interesting. Um, you know, when I said that Americans are 2.5 times more likely to die in a crash than Canadians, it's been true for a long time that road safety has been worse in the US. But for a long time, you could basically explain that through what is known as exposure, or the simple fact that Americans drive on average like 50% more. So more driving, more chances to crash. That was true up until 2010. Starting in 2010, early during the 2010s, the U.S. became much worse at road safety, and Canada became much safer, give or take about 20% in each direction. So we're going in different directions, and this is a trend that has nothing to do with Americans simply driving more. This is a trend that's visible when you just look at crashes or crash deaths per mile driven. So the researchers sort of had some loosely held hypotheses for what might be going on here. Those include stronger enforcement over the last 15 years in Canada than the U.S. around traffic safety, especially around drunk driving. There's been some new rules in Canada. They've gone down to 0.05 as the blood alcohol level in several provinces. Car bloat is more acute in the US, which might be doing something there. But it's a little bit of a open question why the trend lines are going in opposite directions, with the US getting worse while Canada, like frankly most rich countries, gets a little bit better. So, Wes, you're familiar with Canadian road safety writ large. Any thoughts on what might be going on there?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I guess to start with, it is all somewhat relative because compared to the U.S., Canada looks good, but you could also say they're in the middle of the pack compared to a
Europe.
lot of
That's right.
European countries.
Hmm.
But still, it's still definitely more culturally similar to the U.S. and thus probably a better comparison to us than a lot of European countries. And like these differences that you're talking about are much more interesting. So there's a lot of hypotheses you could go through. Like when I did that paper on Australia's safety, like I sort of did the same thing. I took all the hypotheses I had and I tried to prove or disprove each one with data. So, like we know, Canadians are more urbanized than us. Like a lot more of them, percentage of them live in cities, which is similar to like Australia. They have like higher gas taxes. When I was up there in Banff, like actually, I meant to bring this up last week when we talked about that, but this probably only accounts for a few hundred deaths in the United States, but wildlife crashes are a bigger issue than you think. And up there, they had these amazing fences. And they were telling us they go 2 feet underground, like 8 feet up. And these are awesome overpasses and underpasses for wildlife. And they dropped wildlife related crashes by 90 plus percent. And it was like 99% for the bigger
Wow.
animals. So
Wow.
it's something that is, relatively small in the grand scheme of things. But I don't know. Even bringing this topic up, it led me down a couple rabbit holes. I was just trying to compare cities to cities. I was looking for kind of cities with similar populations just to see like what their road fatality
Hmm.
rates would be. So like Toronto's has like almost 3 million people, and theirs was less than one. Like this data wasn't hard to find, so I can't. This data was hard to find, so I can't vouch
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
because most of the data in Canada comes at the province level, so getting at the city level is trickier. But anyways, like Chicago is a similar size, and their rate is over five, which is still
Over
much
five,
better
what?
than
Just to be clear, over five, what?
five road fatalities per 100,000 population.
So
So
5x Toronto. Okay. Wow.
so it's still much lower than the overall U.S. average, which is usually around 12, 13 or so.
Yep. Yep.
Um, in Canada, their overall Canadian average is what, 3 or 4? Is that what it is?
It
Do you
would
remember
be two and a
offhand?
half. If it's two and a half of us, it'd be probably about five, right?
Yeah. But it was the same thing when I was looking at like Montreal had a similar population to Phoenix. Montreal's again is less than one. Phoenix is like 16.
Well, but that sort of makes sense. If you've been to both cities,
Yeah.
Montreal has so much better transit, shorter trips. I'm sure the average Phoenix resident is driving like orders of magnitude more than a lot of people in Montreal, right?
Well, how about comparing Vancouver and Seattle? Because those
That's a
cities
closer one. Yeah.
are closer. So Vancouver again less than one. I think I found out there's around zero point 0.7. Seattle is a relatively safe U.S. city, but it's still 3.6. So we're talking at
That's
least
still a
four
big
times.
differential.
Yeah,
Yeah,
still
yeah,
a
yeah.
big times.
Well, but I do want to make one point though, which is to say, I've written about Canadian road safety a few times, and it's certainly true that part of the advantage that Canada has in reducing crash deaths is they're more urbanized. It's better transit, people drive less for all those reasons. But what that doesn't explain the trend lines in the last 15 years, like because it's not like Vancouver and Toronto suddenly Canadian cities have always been big relative to the US. Transit's always been relatively strong. And when you just look at deaths per mile driven or kilometer driven, it doesn't matter. Canada's getting safer. The US is getting more deadly. So something else is going on there that is hard to put a finger on. I think this is going to be potentially a research question that I hope this new paper is going to kick off, because I think you're right, Wes. It's hard to know exactly and the data's tricky, but I think it's important to figure out.
Yeah, and the data, when I tried to do, this took some back at the envelope calculations just to look at the rural differences.
Yeah.
Theirs is around 10 per 100,000. Ours in rural areas is like 25. So you're
Yeah.
getting the same trends in urban areas and rural
That's really
areas. So,
interesting.
a lot of the hypotheses you might have is all happening in the urban areas. It's not that alone is bigger than that.
Yeah, this is always one that gets people sort of thinking a lot. It's funny, when I was in Canada a while ago, I asked some senior leaders in the auto industry in Canada, like, why is it that the U.S. is so much more deadly for people traveling than Canada? They all looked at me like, is that true? They
Is
didn't
that true?
know. They had no idea. And they're, but what's interesting too, and this goes back to what you said a few minutes ago. When I was talking with Scott Butler, who's a friend of the podcast, a friend of Wes's and mine, who runs Good Roads in Ontario, and I said, like, what do you think about this research paper and the findings there? He said, well, I got to be honest, I'm sort of tired, he said, of Canadians just looking south to compare ourselves. The reality is we need to be looking toward Europe, maybe looking toward Southeast Asia, not Southeast Asia, Oceania, whatever, Australia and New Zealand, because the US is the anomaly, globally speaking. It's not Canada. So he's like, look, what he said is, like, as a Canadian, he said to me, we should be really saying, like, how do we get closer toward, the Netherlands or Denmark, not like how do we, jump up and down and be proud of ourselves for, being better off than our southern neighbors. And I think, honestly, if I was Canadian, I would I would hopefully say the same thing.
Well, if you're a country that wants to feel good about your road safety, you should compare yourselves to us. Like that's the easiest way to
Isn't that
do it.
depressing? Isn't that depressing? A little side note. The International Transport Forum is
Yeah.
the OECD's transportation research arm. Only real transportation nerds will know that. But they now, when they're calculating like the rich world's crash death numbers, they hold U.S. data separate because we're so bad and we're so big that we end up like mucking up the global trend lines when we're included. So I just want to include that because, we want to be consistent this episode, Wes and me, in making sure that every single topic we discuss is one that is thoroughly depressing for our American listeners. So, hey, we're here for you guys.
Yeah, back when I was doing my dissertation 15 plus years ago, like the graphs I always showed were from the OECD. They were the graphs of road safety, so fatality rate per 100,000 population, like starting in the early 70s. And the US was the same as all these countries, like the same as Canada, the same as a lot of the European countries that are so safe now. And that's when the disconnect started. Like we've been getting safer, but not nearly as much as the rest of the world has. And it's gotten to become bigger and bigger in the last 15 years. So since 2010, like you said,
Yeah.
like it's getting even more interesting, but also sad. Like that
Yeah.
we can't keep up with everybody else in terms of road safety.
It's true. It's true. Do we have time for? I'm a little pressed for time on my end, unfortunately. But do we have time for a quick question or two from our mailbag?
Yeah, I think we can do a quick one. So I have one from Josh, and he wants to know: does good bike parking result in increased people biking, like we see when you add bike lanes?
That's a good question. I can answer that through logic and what I've observed in places like the Netherlands, which has invested so heavily in incredible bike parking at their train
Well,
stations.
you saw some
Um,
incredible bike parking while you were on your current trip, right? Down in a basement somewhere. Where were you?
oh, yeah, that's that's what Wes is a loyal follower of mine on Blue Sky. I'm very grateful to that, to my co-host here. No, I was in Bologna, Italy, and I did go down. It was really cool. There's a place called Dynamo in Bologna. If you like bikes, you should totally check it out. It's a former World War II bomb shelter that I think used to be a place in the 19th century where they stored ice, but it's just this cavernous, like a labyrinth, huge, and the city invests a lot of money to fix it up, and it's now turned into like this huge big bike hub for Bologna, which is a very like bike forward progressive city where there's a bar, there's a bike store, there's a bike repair area, and as of I believe next month, there's a place to park your bike underground about a block away from Bologna's major train station, which is very cool. I hope that does induce more people to bike, but I don't know the research about whether better bike parking really does, or the extent to which it increases people cycling. And Wes, I have a feeling you might.
A little bit. I mean, the only research I've seen on this is more specific to workplaces or college campuses.
Mm.
So there's like John Puker and Ralph Bueller did a study with about workplaces, and they found you have higher rates of people biking to work when you had secure bike parking. And I think that word secure is important to keep in mind too. Like just because you have bike parking doesn't mean people feel good about leaving their bike there. Like the building I'm in now, the North Classroom on my campus, 10 years ago, there was an article in the newspaper saying that not only was this campus like the number one place for bike thefts, but my actual building was the number one place for bike thefts in the entire
Hmm.
city of Denver. So uh, I think it frustrates people. Like you feel like if you leave your car in a place, for the most part, it'll be there when you get back. Not as much with bikes. So I feel like if we can do a better job of that, it makes sense that you're going to get more people feeling like they can bike and it'll be there when they get back.
And I would add too that if we're serious about supporting the expansion of electric bikes, this issue of secure bike parking becomes even more important because e-bikes are
Yeah.
worth more, and
Yes, for sure.
this is a big issue. I find I'll just add this and then we can move on, but the street side secure bike parking in London I find really interesting. And there's a startup called Uni that's trying to do something similar in Jersey City and in New York City. I would love to have that in Washington, D.C., honestly, where I live. I think it's a really good idea. And, this maybe, honestly, Wes, this is a good question we've been asked. And maybe it makes me feel like it's a good topic for any PhD students who are listening to our podcast. Like there's some good
Yeah.
questions to research here.
There are. I will say that my campus does the better job of fixing this problem. We have a couple of
Good.
secure bike locker things. One attached to my building, another one that the architecture students on campus have designed these kind of beautiful things you need a key card to get into. So I'm lucky because I bring my bike literally into my office, but I know not everyone has that privilege.
Do we have time for a very quick second question? Because I really
Yeah,
do unfortunately have to
yeah.
run shortly. Apologies.
All right.
But Matt emailed us and said, I'm quite curious about how car bloat and, to be honest, most infrastructure design choices affects emergency response time. Said in my city, we've expanded and grown out city in the transportation network, and our fire department has gotten slower in its responses. What do you think? And P.S. This is important. He says, P.S. Ciders are legit. I just wanted you to know that, Wes. He said that. Anyway,
All
your
right.
thoughts.
Well, I disagree with the latter point, but going to the to the
Of
first
course you
one,
do.
um, I don't know. I've seen. I mean, this is some research topics we're trying to get into now. Is trying to see how traffic calming affects emergency response time, or things like right sizing streets and a lot of the stuff cities are trying to do to affect safety. Like the counter argument often comes from the fire marshal being like, "Oh, you can't do X, Y, and Z because like we need to get our fire trucks." And I think the data we're seeing so far on that front saying that no, like having like even a bus only lane, even though it takes away car lanes, it gives these emergency vehicles a place to go. On the car bloat side, that's trickier because I mean, you're in cities when you hear the sirens behind you, people move over. It's a little bit harder to move over when your car is bigger. So maybe there's something to it, but I don't know. Have you heard anything on that front?
No, I've never heard of. I keep my finger to the pulse of all the arguments against car bloat pretty close, pretty well, I think, and I've never heard anything about emergency response being affected directly. Um, I will say that a lot of, so including a major project I'm working on now, actually through MIT. Um, the one of the major obstacles to road diets you always hear from cities is fire departments that say like that'll slow down response times. We can't do that, and I want to offer here. Finally, I can offer something constructive, rather than just critical of and depressing. A really brilliant idea for how to handle this, and I think this actually came from Roger Millar, who just recently retired as the Washington State Transportation Secretary. He had a brilliant solution to handle the fire departments who say, "Oh, we can't navigate a street that narrow. You can't do the road diet." What he would say is, all right, understood. The last thing we as the transportation department want to do is get in the way of our emergency response partners. So give us your worst fire truck driver, and we'll go replicate the situation. We'll put cones up or whatever. And if that person has a problem getting through quickly, we will absolutely change the design. And then, so you do that. What obviously happens, the machismo of the fire department kicks in and they go right through perfectly. And they say, oh, okay, it's fine. And then you just move
Yep.
right along. I thought this was like an Aikido move to work with EMS at the time. So I'll just feel free to copy that idea. Please credit Roger if and when you do.
No, that's
Um,
my exact advice I give on that. Like when they were trying to do some of the traffic circles in Denver, I talked to the engineer from Tool Design that was doing it. He actually drew the circle in the street, had the fire truck come see if they could get around it. He's like, "Yep, we can do it," and then they built it the next day. And subsequently, other um, portions of the city, the fire department complained about it, but they had it on video that they were able to get around it.
it makes sense. Thank you, Matt. That was a very good question, and we always welcome questions. Feel free to email them to us. But Wes, where I am, it's now happy hour time. I don't think it is where you are, but maybe we can suck it up.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 7 o'clock here, actually.
So rail drinks. I'm not a Bloody Mary person or a mimosa person really. So when I think of if I'm gonna, I don't do this much these days, but if I'm gonna have a drink in the morning, it's oftentimes something like a Guinness. So I have a Guinness Zero here with me.
Wow.
It's
And
one of my
by the way, I
favorite
got a
drinks there.
question from a listener wondering why are we doing what is rail drinks? It's basically our way of celebrating the end of the workday, which it is for me, and it's not for Wes this time. But we like to end it with a drink. And I am going to be having a rosé, which is the local wine or a very popular wine from southern France, where I am right now. So, cheers and thank you to Wes for indulging my time difference in this time.
That is still good, even though it's a Guinness Zero. It's still delicious. So
Guinness is
I highly
always good.
recommend.
Always, always, always.
All right. So when will we be back?
I think September 11th, Thursday, September 11th at 6 p.m. Eastern live.
Yes.
So
we'll
join
be
us on
back-
YouTube.
Back on YouTube Live. So we look forward to that and enjoy the rest of your trip. And how can they contact us should they want to?
Yeah, please give us feedback at lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. Email us with your questions. We always enjoy getting them. And you can contact me at davidzipper.com and sign up for my newsletter if you want to there. And Wes, you always hide from everyone, so I won't share your information unless you want me to.
If they really need me, they can find me. So
It's
I
probably
think
true.
that's good enough. Yeah.
But I will say, Wes and I've been really happy with the response we've gotten from the podcast. Please do share it with a friend if you've enjoyed it. Leave a rating and be in touch. We look forward to seeing you on September 11th or soon afterwards.
All right. Sounds good. See you then.